Hi, I'm Brittany Broderson. Enjoy this clip from Window on the West Coast, the show that gives you a front row seat to what's happening in Delta and on the Sunshine Coast.
So back in 2020, we were doing a collection survey and we came across a set of 12 Dentalium Shells from the Lil'wat Nation. And we took a look to our archaeological database of First Nations artifacts that was put together by Yumks Rudy Reimer from the Squamish Nation. And on that database, the shells were listed as burial or ceremonial use. So at that point, we reached out to our colleague, Alison Pascal of the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center, and we had worked with her in past projects, such as our Coast Salish weaving exhibit, and we started the conversation there about the repatriation of these important artifacts back to the Lil'wat Nation.
The Sunshine Coast Museum has been repatriating items for years, and now museums across Canada are finally starting a movement to get artifacts back where they belong.
So back in May 2021, we signed on to the BC Museum Association call to action for the repatriation of First Nations artifacts. And so for our organization, it made a lot of sense to sign onto this call to action because we've already been doing this work, and it's just a really important guiding document to encourage the return of culturally significant items to First Nations.
But before repatriation began, local First Nations leaders were putting in the groundwork.
I think it's really important for all of us to remember that First Nations cultural leaders like Sadal Kawas, Lucy Bell, and Jiskang Collison from the Haida Nation, as well as many others who are First Nations workers, have been doing this hard work for many, many years, and oftentimes facing barriers from organizations and museums that don't want to return these important artifacts. So I think just when we're having the repatriation conversation, it's really important to acknowledge that foundational work has been done by First Nations cultural workers. But at the museum here in Gibson's, we've been doing repatriation going back to the 1990s, and oftentimes working with our neighbors in the Sechelt Nation. And in 2010, we actually put together a repatriation policy, which really outlines the steps to return culturally significant items to First Nations. So that's been guiding our work since then. So when it comes to repatriation, the really high priority items are ceremonial usage items, as well as burial items, mortuary pieces, as well as human remains, of course. And so these items have really high priority when it comes to repatriation. And I think what we are going to see is a little bit more of a movement towards the repatriation of utilitarian items from museum collections. And again, it's just a chance to work together and to build relationships and to try to acknowledge some of the wrongs that have occurred through colonization. And the return of cultural items is one of those pieces. So I think it's really important work, and it feels good to be a part of that.
The past few years have shed a lot of light on the dark history of Canada, and that may change the way museums tell our history.
Yeah, I think museums and cultural organizations have done a really great job at telling the really celebratory histories of the country, but at the same time, we haven't done as good a job telling the more negative aspects of history. So when we're talking about, say, residential school or the internment of Japanese Canadians, these are parts of our history that are they're challenging, and they're really heart-wrenching to deal with. And more so these days, we see people having a thirst. They want to know the whole history, not just the really positive parts of our history. And so museums are starting to take steps towards telling that more holistic view of local heritage, and we're excited to be doing that work.
Many of the artifacts in the museum have been repatriated, but there is a fantastic exhibit co-curated by the Squamish Nation that's a must-see.
I guess one exhibit that I'd really encourage people to come down to the museum to take a look at would be this exhibit I'm standing in right now. This is Kwekwenmote, Pieces of the Past, and this exhibit is a co-curated exhibit with the Squamish Nation, and we put this together back in 2011 or so. And so in this exhibit, you'll see Squamish Nation stone tool artifacts that were found from this area in their traditional unceded territory. So this is a really good example of working together. This is co-curated And this is one of our permanent exhibits, and some of the stone tools here date anywhere from a few hundred years before present, all the way up to 8,000 to 10,000 years old. So there's some really astounding pieces here. I would encourage folks to come down and take a look. You know, we're really proud of the collaborative work we've done with the Squamish and the work that we do with the Seashell Nation. And so we're always looking to continue those collaborations and build community that way. And the biggest thing is I just want folks to know that the museum is your museum. We're here for you. So come down, we want to chat if you have questions. I think it's a really exciting time. That would be one thing I'd like to comment on, is that people are really interested in history and taking a look back to understand in a more holistic way all aspects of history. So I think it's a really great time for museums to be doing this work. And I would just encourage folks to come down, and we'd love to have a chat about that.
For great stories like this and more, watch Window on the West Coast, Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. for BC viewers on Eastlink Community TV Channel 610. Available only to Eastlink video customers.